Today we're going to follow up on the third party and the concept of the third party and subjective illusion of control. And we're going to see how that kind of feeds into ideology, whether it's political or cultural or just ideology in general, any philosophy in general. So on the surface level here, we have what the ideology preaches as its pure self. So if you have any language system or philosophy that claims a truth or a partial truth and then projects that as the centerpiece of what it tries to communicate, that's the superego part, and that's what the ideology wears on the surface level to project itself as the pure and the truthful. And it sort of markets itself as the primary deliverer of the good, the pure and the good, using this superego surface layer part of it. Now this layer here is used then to justify the central operating portion of whatever collective organism that's formed to serve this symbol here, this superego pure symbol. And this middle portion here is all about exploiting whatever this pure symbol represents for selfish and subjective purposes. So if you think, say, we have a liberal group here, right? A group that is founded on liberal values and ideology here. Well, it's going to wear this pure symbol and project it as the primary reason for its existence here, the reason portion. And usually this portion here contains the most moral part, the part that makes the most sense. It draws people in, and it speaks various truths that really do make a lot of sense. And this portion here is going to seem very rational, and it has a moral purity component and function to it. So besides from this, you then have, if we were talking about this liberal ideology and the institution that is formed out of it, you have this whole layer here, a whole society and a collective that is formed to benefit from this symbol. If you have a political cause, whether it's left-wing ideology or right-wing ideology, or even if you have a religious cause, or any reason for any pure reason, then you're going to need people who are within an organization, right? A tribe and a collective is going to form out of it. So you're going to have opportunities for personal achievement and advancement within that collective. That institution is going to have an entire merit system where the most loyal person and the most talented and skilled person is going to be rewarded, right? Out of this pure reason here is going to spawn a system of winners and losers within the hierarchy. So you're going to have opportunities for personal achievement, advancement. And what else? We also have a platform then, sort of a backdrop for sense of community and belonging, right? A group of people here with shared needs and shared values then combine together and work towards a common goal. So again, nothing to do with the pure function here, which is the superego, what the institution here uses as the primary justification for its existence. It has nothing to do with this selfish needs here, these selfish needs here. But because this exists here, this can be built. This very subjective layer here. And from this, you can build wealth. This collective then binds together. This gives it legitimacy, which means attention, which means donations and money. You can see the correlation here between any political ideology here, or any company, or an organization for purely material needs. Same thing here. And also religion, organized religion, right? You have a hierarchy system that provides an opportunity for someone to gain, someone to win, and fulfill their personal ambition of status and hierarchy. It also provides context, which the subject and the subjective really covets, right? The subject wants to explain away and possess its environment, an environment that is completely unreasonable and indifferent to its own needs. So it has to somehow explain and contextualize so that it feels that it has some sort of context. And finally, and this is kind of similar to what we covered before, is the sense of self-control that the subject covets and wants. Really, this is really attractive to the subject, this illusion of self-control over an objective and indifferent environment. If it can possess here this reason and morality and pure truthfulness, then all of this seems justified, right? All of these subjective and selfish needs here seems justified. It's involved in something that's legitimate, that possesses reality in a way. So here, if this here is the superego function, then all of this here is the ego function. It's the ego layer that is built around any pure superego function. And this here, this institution that spawns the ego here, wears on top of it the superego ideology here as the primary pure symbol. So it wears as the primary justification for all of this activity here. This is its tribute to the objective. This is the reason for all the subjective activity here. And this could be anything from a philosophy to a charitable cause, to, of course, political ideology, to religious or scientific or academic institutions, right? All of these things here holds a pure purpose, which then there's a layer of subjectiveness that has nothing to do with this here, but then fulfills the subject's need for all of this. So what does this mean here? This means that the problem survives, right? Whatever this here professes to solve, right? There's always this purity here, and thus there also has to be an equal and opposite impurity that this thing professes to eliminate or solve or overcome. If there's purity here, then there has to be impurity on the other side, right? But because this has to exist and survive, this also has to remain in order to serve this self-justifying cycle of needs here. Because what does the ego want? It wants to possess the solution. But in order to do that, it also has to understand the problem as it is. So the problem here has to remain in a form that's understandable to the ego, right? Because the ego is all about possessing and manipulating its environment. So it has to understand the problem at some level. So it's within its best interest for the problem to be as is. If a problem and an impurity, whatever perceived impurity, is not understandable, that's a problem for the ego. Because then it has to change its object of worship, its object of purity. It has to reevaluate here. But the problem is that the ego needs to monopolize. It has to monopolize control, and so it has to have equal monopoly over the problem and also the solution. Otherwise, all of this here is under threat, right? All of this fun here, all of this selfish and subjective activity, no fun can be had if these two, the purity and the impurity, are not within the realm of subjective control. And so this middle structure here exists without reason and serves this, which also the reasonable part also exists without reason. And so the problem then survives because it's within the best interest of the ego here for this arrangement to remain as is. And why is this? What does this reveal? This reveals that all problems are then circumstantial, right? Or invented, or imagined. Because for there to be a problem, there's a specific pattern that has to remain for there to be a problem. And that pattern is also subjective to that circumstance. And you can see why this sort of feeds into the layer of hypocrisy, inherent ideological hypocrisy. Because if each collective organism, as opposed to the individual organism, we have a collective organism, then it's going to be self-justifying, right? It's going to try to preserve itself and keep itself safe, and most importantly, oppose its polar opposite or its enemy. Every collective has its antithesis or enemy, that its sworn enemy that it has to eliminate and keep in check. And that's part of the problem, right? If the enemy is familiar and is known to this ego layer here, then there's not a problem. If the problem is not understandable, then it can't be controlled and it can't be monopolized by the ego. And so say that there is a collective philosophy that is inherently against materialism. For example, eventually, and this is going to happen like clockwork, right? Eventually, this symbol here that the collective worships anti-materialism, a function of the superego and its various moral justifications for it, eventually it's going to grow a layer here, a layer of corruption here, that is directly hypocritical to its pure function, to what it wears on top as its pure self, the pure image that it projects. It's eventually going to be used. Maybe the leader starts demanding to build material wealth for whatever justification here, right? It's going to be used as a prop for all personal ambition. And that's one instance where you can see the inherent, it's a feature and it's a self-preserving mechanism for an ideology to be hypocritical.